Good evening, everybody. My name is Jerry Herbert, and I'm the chair of the Annisquam Library. And it is a fortunate job because every once in a while you get a phone call from two people like Jill Carter and Marcy Lyman, and they have an idea to do an event at the library. And it's great because it means that more people come into the library, and it's used in many different ways. And so if any of you who are here tonight have suggestions about how the library could become more accessible, we're all ears. So without further ado, Marcy and Jill called to say they would like to celebrate Poetry Month, the month of April, and have an event at the library, very informal, where people would come and if they chose to, read a poem and tell why they selected the poem that they would like to read. And Marcy is going to be our mistress of ceremonies? Facilitator. Very PC. Yes. Thank you all for coming.
Hi. So Jill and I had this crazy idea, and part of it comes from being inspired by Jill, listening to her read her poetry here one night. And part of it comes from an inspiration where in our neighborhood we have had these poetry readings where people just bring a poem that they want to read, so it's been lots of fun. So tonight, we didn't know who would come or how many, so we're just delighted that everybody's here. So this is, as Jerry said, anybody who wants to read a poem or read one that they've written, we'd love to hear them. And if you will be sure to tell us why you chose what you are going to read. That's an important part of Jill's idea because it gives us an insight into, you know, what it was that caught your imagination about a particular poem. So time-wise, we're not, if it goes on, you know, like all of Paradise Lost, we may need to negotiate the timing, but feel free to read or recite whatever you choose. And in order to model how this is done, we're going to invite Jill to come up and do the first, and then she will introduce Jerry, who will read the second.
The most frustrating part of this for me is there are so many poems I love. So how to choose? And I finally chose D.H. Lawrence's Mountain Lion. He was one of the great men of letters in the 20th century. He's compared with James Joyce, Virginia Woolf. Sadly, he's known as Lady Charlie's lover. But he was a fabulous poet and an essayist and wrote many novels. And he writes about animals. And I love animals. And so that's why, and this has always been one of my most favorite. Mountain Lion. Climbing through the January snow into the Lobo Canyon, dark grow the spruce trees. Blue is the balsam. Water sounds still unfrozen, and the trail is still evident. Men. 2 men. Men, the only animal in the world to fear. They hesitate. We hesitate. They have a gun. We have no gun. Then we all advance to meet. 2 Mexicans, strangers emerging out of the dark and snow and inwardness of the Lobo Valley. What are they doing here on this vanishing trail? What is he carrying? Something yellow, a deer? He smiles foolishly, as if he were caught doing wrong. And we smile foolishly, as if we didn't know. He is quite gentle and dark-faced. It is a mountain lion. A long, long, slim cat, yellow like a lioness, dead. He trapped her this morning, he says, smiling foolishly. lift up her face, her round, bright face, bright as frost, her round, fine-fashioned head with two dead ears, and stripes in the brilliant frost of her face, sharp, fine, dark stripes, dark, keen, fine rays in the brilliant frost of her face, beautiful, dead eyes. They go out towards the open. We continue on into the gloom of Lobo. And above the trees, I found her lair. A hole in the blood-orange brilliant rocks that stick up. A little cave, and bones and twigs and a perilous ascent. So, she will never leap up that way again, with the yellow flash of a mountain lion's long shoot. And her bright, striped frost face will never watch any more out of the shadow of the cave and the blood-orange rocks above the trees of the Lobo dark valley mouth. Instead, I look out, and out to the dim of the desert, like a dream, never real, to the snow of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the rise of the mountains of Picorus. And near across at the opposite steep of snow, green trees, motionless, standing in snow like a Christmas toy. And I think, in this empty world, there was room for me and a mountain lion. And I think in the world beyond how easily we might spare 1 million or 2 of humans and never miss them. Yet, what a gap in the world. The missing white frost face of that slim yellow mountain lion.
Thank you.
We chose this poem because it's one of our favorites. And the bonus is that it's written by our dear friend Ann Babsett Carter. And it's called One Morning I Rode the Patriot to New Haven. Snow accentuates the geometry of land, bringing roof planes into plain sight, and isolating cars left next to railroad tracks. Leaving Boston, I stare down at unknown histories. Samples of nature aren't elegant along train lines. Like a clamp, snow cusps form on tree trunks, and what gray birch or maple do survive grow brittle and break long before they become graceful.
Yet, these objects fit here above Providence, where there are more antennas than steeples, and the Pawtucket Waterworks Company operates, as it should, unceasingly beside a river. The brick facade is unadorned, and its neighbors would be the first to tell you, people at factories don't need ornaments. Why else would so many of them paint their boxy houses plainest blue or the pale lime of Jell-O, not caring that some colors never die back like the leaves in winter? More than geography separates these residents from the current range of historically accurate paints developed in Williamsburg. If it weren't for snow, Rhode Island might be beige.
After Providence, bursts of tidal flats claim dominion. White pines, knee-deep in water, stand about like witches talking to one another, to which the fields pay no attention. They've been used and are asleep. These small, stubborn properties, like dank chalkboards, grow to the same height in summer, but come the cold, they know when to freeze. Winter accentuates the cycle of bare bone days, the getting up, of going home, the work in between. These people north of Kingston seem to say, everyone has a choice about where he puts his imagination, and theirs isn't in house paints.
We don't stop at Westerly, and suddenly a bog so livid it flushes the morning pink, stains our eyes. In another season, cranberries will bleed from here, profusely like a spring tide. Now clumps of boulders stonily pock the high pastures at Stonington, and the only crosses are telephone poles. It is definitely Connecticut. Vistas begin, move out beyond creeks to bays, then nothing. No one can predict their depth. Villages reside in the hollows of a serpentine coast, and shacks dot the isthmuses along beaches long enough to curve.
As a single osprey surveys its boat carcass kingdom, we are across the Thames to New London, a city of clean yards and bell buoys cast aside like giant tops.
Friendships and neighbors so nicely, doesn't it? So, I think this is informal, and I'm not exactly a great logician. So, I would suggest that if you have a poem you want to read, stand up and come up and read it. And I would also encourage you to say your name, because we may all know each other, and then again, we may not. So, would somebody like to volunteer to come up next?
I can go.
Perfect, thank you.
My name is Don Kipp, and to add to that, I would say I'm very, very happy and proud to be Uncle Nelson's brother-in-law and Judy Nelson's brother. This is probably called regeneration, but I should put my glasses on.
And can you be sure to speak up?
Yep.
Thank you.
Regeneration. Knowledge is only incidental. Hope is all. From Brothers to Dragons, Robert Penn Warren. It isn't that we're wiser, or even that we know more. We often forget what we knew, what you just now have come to know. But there is a separation. We seem to reside now on the fence's other side. We clearly are coming to an end, just as light will surely bend. We do not have any ticket stamped as proof of some continued journey, only proof that life is long and we are ready for new songs. Never underestimate how important you are, darling youth. You are the new growth that keeps us renewing as we try to help you gird yourselves for this life that keeps ensuing.
Pardon the fedora, but I'm trying to look like a poet. I'm going to read two short poems related. Well, I know one of them is a poem, and the other you'll decide whether it is or not. The first one I'm going to read is by a great poet, Charles Bukowski. He's a great poet anyway, so that's why I'm reading it. But he is the poet laureate of the dispossessed. The flop houses and the dive bars are his milieu. But he also writes a lot of poems about writing. And I'm a writer. I'm a novelist in the sense that I've been writing the same novel since 1968. Figuring James Joyce took 10 years to write Ulysses, so I got him beat. The problem that has ensued is that the original protagonist is now the protagonist's grandfather, but that's just a minor issue. So, this is a poem by Charles Bukowski called So You Want to Be a Writer. If it doesn't come bursting out of you in spite of everything, don't do it. Unless it comes unasked out of your heart and your mind and your mouth and your gut, don't do it. If you have to sit for hours staring at your computer screen or hunched over your typewriter searching for words, don't do it. And if you're doing it for money or fame, don't do it. If you're doing it because you want women in your bed, don't do it. Drat. If you have to sit there and rewrite it again and again, don't do it. If it's hard work just thinking about doing it, don't do it. If you're trying to write like somebody else, forget about it. If you have to wait for it to roar out of you, then wait patiently. If it never does roar out of you, do something else. If you first have to read it to your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your parents or to anyone at all, you're not ready. Don't be like so many writers. Don't be like so many thousands of people who call themselves writers. Don't be dull and boring and pretentious. Don't be consumed with self-love. The libraries of the world have yawned themselves to sleep over your kind. Don't add to that. Don't do it. Unless it comes out of your soul like a rocket. Unless being still would drive you to madness or suicide or murder, don't do it. Unless the sun inside you is burning your gut, don't do it. When it is truly time, and if you have been chosen, it will do it by itself, and it will keep on doing it until you die or it dies in you. There is no other way, and there never was. So the second thing is called Hey, Charles Bukowski by Tom Meacham. Hey, Charles Bukowski, I get it. I get it. The bursting out, the like a rocket, all that. But what about the rest of us? I dreamed growing up of being the person you talk about. Rimbaud and Verlaine strung out on absinthe. Edgar Allan Poe walking the late night streets. But it never came roaring out. And the waiting itself became too pleasant. So what about the rest of us? The posturers, the posers, the guys who play for the cheap laughs. So I say, I want to make a case for a mere whimper. I want to argue for the slow leak. I want to make a case for the doggerel, for rhythms, clumsy and weak. Let's hear it for the cacophonous, for the clumsy and the coarse, for verses inelegant and lame, for descent into bathos. 3 cheers for the fatuous and foolish, and 3 more for the banal, and for the poetess with the tin ear that no number of cliches will appall. Let's throw in some humorless self-confidence and a saccharine, tuneless song, and kudos to the bourgeois bohemian whose Hamlet was only 5 minutes long. Wait, Charles? I get it. You mean the result of all that would be an absolutely lousy poem like this one? Oh, I get it. Forget I said anything.
I am Duncan Nelson, who has the honor to be John's brother-in-law and my cellmate's cellmate.
You only got one.
And I always love to team up with, where's Tom? Yeah, because we've done a few of these together. We even got a cannon to fire off at just the right time at the Maritime Heritage occasion. So, this poem I wrote maybe 40 years ago. Someone in my English department at UMass Boston was going to a hairdressers convention, and there was going to be a competition, a $200 prize for somebody who wrote about butterflies. So she asked me, because she knew my reputation as a doggerelist, and knew I would push a rhyme until it gave up and succumbed. So I'm so glad that I love to be assigned, given an assignment. And so I don't, sometimes nothing comes bursting out of me, so someone has to tap me in some ways. So I decided, okay, that sounds like fun. And I've always loved the word chrysalis. So I thought, well, I know about butterflies, that's something I know about them, that chrysalis is involved in their development. And then I thought, I was thinking about Tom, but chrysalis, what the hell are you going to rhyme with chrysalis? So, and then this is when the lightning struck, because I had it. So, you ready? You'll see it, right away you'll see why I had to go on and finish the poem. Butterfly, emerging from its chrysalis, as light as any thistle is. Oh boy. Whirled round by helicopterist, pinned down by lepidopterist. Lo, these great wings that flutter by. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's butterfly. Nature in a thriller, Diller takes the lowly caterpillar, wraps it up in a cocoon, and presto changeo, at high noon, from out the pupa's larval stupor springs this marvel super duper. That's the butterfly poem. First class I give every year. I get up on the table. I have butterfly wings that someone, and I get up and I recite that poem, and it always works. Because that, it's so about, and this, you see, what is poetry, but really it's the emergence. It really is the out of the pupa's larval stupor springs this marvel super duper. So however you get yourself to do it, and I'm so delighted to hear what I've heard so far, and looking forward to hearing everybody else's. It's a wonderful thing that you all are doing. Thank you.
I'm Eleanor, and this is a quieter poem. You wrote the email, and I was thinking about a visit from a friend I had last week. And I remember going to his father's funeral a few years ago on a very cold, bright day. So this is about that. It's called Burial. 'Tis a gift to be humble, in a white-clabbered kind of way, at the funeral of a father of a friend, where the altar gets a lemon licking, and the rat poison will kill you conveniently in a state of grace. Still, there is comfort in the congregationless dust on the iron radiators, the armrests rubbed dry to the bone, and the dog-eared hymnals. All men deserve a burial, where the pews reek of faith, paraffin wax, March apples, and sorrow.
I thought this would be appropriate to come right after that one. When I grew up in, I'm Terry Sands. When I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, my father was a huge fan of Alfred Lord Tennyson, and I was brought up on all the King Arthur sagas, and starting with Idylls of the King there. And when my father died, at his funeral, I read this poem, which is the Crossing the Bar. Now, crossing the bar often is associated with death, and it's often read at funerals, but it's got a whole nother side to it. It's also a poem about transition of any kind, not just death. And interestingly, this is just kind of a little aside. About a month ago, I'm a judge on the land court in Boston, and I had to go to Dubai to give a talk at an international conference on land registration. And one of the fascinating parts for the people in Dubai, and actually this was an international conference, was the concept of accretion of land and how that's treated legally. I think that most of you know what accretion of land is. When the ocean recedes and land is developed, who owns the land? And when I was going over this poem, there is a little section, I'm not going to tell you what it is, that is actually about accretion of land, which I was fascinated by. So take this, I mean, everybody I think knows the poem, but think of it not as a funeral dirge, but as a something about a poem about transitions. Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that, the dark. And may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from outborn of time and place, the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Thank you.
I'm Rob Russell, and I'm going to read a poem by Mary Oliver called In Blackwater Woods. This is actually follows what Mary has been talking about on losses or changes. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is now nameless. Every year, Everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this: the fires in the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go.
No, I am B.B. Nelson, and that's my husband, that's my brother, and I probably could do that with many more people here. I had actually meant to read a poem that I'd written, but we've been moving around so much I can't find that book of three-hole punch poems that I have put away somewhere, so one of these days we'll do this again and I'll have it there. But we've been reading this poem, it showed up, I'm not sure why. Duncan did his doctoral thesis on Thomas Hardy's poetry, and this little book called Selected Shorter Poems of Thomas Hardy sort of showed up, and then, you know how when you open a book and it's like right on a certain page, like that's there? And the one here is called The Man He Killed. And I've just, ever since I read All's Quiet on the Western Front, I found it so difficult to understand why we do this. It just seems like, don't we have the evidence yet? And so this poem really touched me, and so I thought I would share it with you. It's called The Man He Killed. Had he and I but met by some old ancient inn, we should have sat us down to wet right many a nipperkin, but ranged as infantry and staring face to face, I shot at him as he at me, and killed him in his place. I shot him dead because he was my foe. Just so, my foe, of course he was. That's clear enough, although he thought he'd list perhaps, offhand, like just as I was out of work, had sold his traps, no other reasons why. Yes, quaint and curious war is. You shoot a fellow down, you treat if met where any bar is, or help to half a crown.
As a little girl, my family lived in Chicago when we weren't here, and if my dentist was in downtown in the Loop, and if the appointment went well and there was extra time, we got to stop at the Art Institute. And 60 years later, I'm an art historian, so it must have had its effect. But I know that this particular picture, which you'll barely be able to make out, is in the Art Institute. It's a picture of St. Martin of Tours on his horse. It's very big. The figures are life-size. It's by El Greco. I don't particularly remember it, except that about 40 years ago, 40 years later, I sat down at a coffee shop in Silver Spring, Maryland, and wrote this. So here we are. It's called Martin. Voluminous, capacious, shearing thick, woolly rich, with spare folds to warm the spirits. This cloak makes one warm, body and soul, and it makes one cold, shivering, ashamed, right to die. When one wears it, the other doesn't. This is the algorithm of have and have not, the measure of need, the way of the world. Until Martin comes his way, looks down from his steed satisfied. He feels the wrap, collar to hem, all around his shoulder, belly, lap, and legs, all warm, all well, all proud. No damp gets in. The clothes make the man. The cloak makes every part fine. But seeing the stranger in the road, he feels the chill in the bone, feels the damp. The cloak makes the man, provided the one who thinks it is his seizes the sword before it becomes a weapon, proves that it was two cloaks all along, and he only bearing it, conjoined to the one needing it, waiting at the gate. Sufficient for bodies and for souls. Enough. This is the measure of a human being. This is the algorithm of our survival. This is the way of the world.
Well, I guess I haven't, but I'm Bibi's brother. I'm Eric Kipp. It's really wonderful to be here tonight. This really rocks. I think we should do this like all the time, at least once a month. I've been sort of reintroduced to poetry by my good brother, who's really delved into it, and also my brother-in-law, who teaches about such things as writing. And I guess two of my favorite poems are Robert Frost, who I consider a working man's poet, and Rumi, who I'm sure we've all heard of. So the Rumi poem, the Frost poem, and he had a lot to say about doggerels, but I think he pitched out a few himself. But he was fairly opinionated. But I just love the way he struggled with his life and wrote about it. And I'm coming to know that all work is spiritual in some sense, and to write about it is even better. So this one I love is called The Dust of Snow. The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had root. I wanted to change the last line, but I was told I couldn't do that. and Rumi, I've always enjoyed.
What would you have changed it to?
I mean, he was all about the local language of the day, but from a heart. It is a good word, Tom. Thank you. So that was the higher power I checked with. And this was a wonderful thing that happened that Robert Bly got this guy Coleman Barks to translate Rumi, who's been translated many times. And so if I have a little southern lilt to this, that's Coleman Barks speaking through. But this is from a chapter called, and Rumi, as you know, was a 13th century poet. And I think about everything that's going on in the world today, and I think of Rumi, and it was a pretty anxious time back then, because he had to move because the Mongols were coming in. I mean, it was stressful times, and it was stressful times for Frost, and they found a way through, and they did that, I guess, through writing and teaching people that way. So this is Spring Giddiness, which we're in, and Barks names this particular chapter, Stand in the Wake of This Chattering and Grow Airy. And this is a poem called Spring. No, it's not. That's not the one I want to read. It's where everything is music, right? Don't worry about saving these songs. And if one of our instrument breaks, it doesn't matter. We have fallen into the place where everything is music. The strumming and the flute notes rise into the atmosphere, and even if the whole world's harp should burn up, there will still be hidden instruments playing. So the candle flickers and goes out. We have a piece of flint and a spark. This singing art is a sea foam. The graceful movements come from a pearl somewhere on the ocean floor. Poems reach up like spindrift and the edge of driftwood along the beach wanting. They derive from a slow and powerful root that we can't see. Stop the words now. Open the window in the center of your chest and let the spirits fly in and out.
P.D. Littlefield. This is a poem by Elizabeth Bishop, who's one of my favorite poets. There's a particular way that she makes contact with the world that she describes that somehow resonates with her particular vulnerability, her sensitivity, and often it's with an object or some kind of other that says a lot about her relationship to the world. This poem seemed appropriate for our area because it's called The Fish. I caught a tremendous fish and held him beside the boat, half out of water with my hook fast in a corner of his mouth. He didn't fight. He hadn't fought at all. He hung a grunting weight, battered and venerable and homely. Here and there his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper, and its pattern of darker brown was like wallpaper shapes, like full-blown roses stained and lost through age. He was speckled with barnacles, fine rosettes of thyme, and infested with tiny white sea lice, and underneath 2 or 3 rags of green weed hung down. While his gills were breathing in the terrible oxygen, the frightening gills, fresh and crisp with blood, that can cut so badly, I thought of the coarse white flesh packed in like feathers, the big bones and the little bones, the dramatic reds and blacks of his shiny entrails, and the pink swim bladder like a big peony. I looked into his eyes, which were far larger than mine, but shallower and yellowed, the irises backed and packed with tarnished tinfoil seen through the lenses of old scratched isinglass. They shifted a little, but not to return my stare. It was more like the tipping of an object towards the light. I admired his sullen face, the mechanism of his jaw, and then I saw that from his lower lip, if you could call it a lip, grim, wet, and weapon-like, hung 5 old pieces of fish line, with their 5 big hooks grown firmly in his mouth. A green line frayed at the end where he broke it, 2 heavier lines, and a fine black thread still crimped from the strain and snap when it broke and he got away. Like medals with their ribbons frayed and wavering, a 5-haired beard of wisdom trailing from his aching jaw. I stared and stared, and victory filled up the little rented boat. From the pool of bilge where oil had spread a rainbow round the rusted engine, to the bailer rusted orange, the sun-cracked thwarts, the oarlocks on their strings, the gunwales, until everything was rainbow, 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 and I let the fish go.
I'm Kathleen Adams, and I had thought I would read something of Sandberg or Rachel Lindsay, because they wrote so much sing-songy material, but I failed to get what I wanted, and so I fell back on one of my own poems, which I guess mostly sort of comes from my parents loving poetry, and especially my mother. And it's sort of a seasonal poem, a little bit Christmassy. I apologize for that. But it is called Tree. If it's thought that counts, count mine. As the mountain came to Mohammed, so came the Blue Ridge gifts at Christmas time, wrapped red and green, new for old, warmth and interceding with cold. Seated in the lap of love, we lapped up nogs and wine. How dark can the dark be, the dark of the year? Full spectrum, the mother lode shines here, quills jeremiads, soothes laments, squelches naysayers doubting what is meant. It could be called a thin place, yet I am sanguine, dreaming its embrace. We stalk the woods, hunting. Breathless, I hurry to be the first to claim the quarry. We stop at the spring house, thirsting for the holy water flowing under ice, sipping from cupped hands and dipping again for more. Then I see what I have come for, and running towards it, stumble in the snow. It is not squirrel or rabbit or deer I hunt, no, but Virginia white pine, standing here so still and green, a sacrifice for joy and bliss. And what I want is this. My father swings the axe to bring it down and speaks his valediction. I declare it is the most beautiful. So says my father, so says my sister, so says my brother, so say I. A small bird chucks and dusk comes on. Home we tramp in the crunching snow to my mother, towing the tree. It is so, says she. And what of the baby Christ? As in a palindrome, we dreamed God to be no more at all than we can be, and declared him most beautiful. Looked back and saw the beauty we still can see.
I'm Holly Clay Smith, and when I saw this announcement through the History Club, I thought, well, that was a wonderful idea, and I wanted to read something. And I thought, what will I read? And then last night around 8 o'clock, I got my daughter's dissertation to edit. They call when you're graduating from university in England, your thesis is called a dissertation. And my daughter, Rosie Smith, is writing about the plight of the Muslim women, more as seen through painting and photography than anything else, but she used this poem as a preface to her dissertation. And the poet is called Farah Furqahzad, or something like, nobody's pronounced it to me, I only read it this morning. And this woman was an artist and a writer whose life was very short, cut off at the age of 32 in a car accident. But she spanned a period between a dynasty that had great opening in terms of more liberalization, and the Shah of Iran coming in, and everything taking, women being more repressed. So she was considered to be an iconoclast and a feminist, and she was somebody who spoke out about women's oppression more than most people had the courage to do. So she writes, "Why should I stop? Why? The birds have gone in search of the blue direction. The horizon is vertical, vertical, and movement fountain-like. And at the limits of vision, shining planets spin. The earth in elevation reaches repetition, and air wells, changes into tunnels of connection, and day is a vastness which does not fit into narrow mind of newspaper worms. Why should I stop? The road passes through the capillaries of life. The quality of the environment in the ship of the uterus of the moon will kill the corrupt cells, and in the chemical space after sunrise, there is only sound. Sound that will attract the particles of time. Why should I stop? What can a swamp be? What can a swamp be but the spawning ground of corrupt insects? Swollen corpses squall the morgue's thoughts. The unmanly one has hidden his lack of manliness in blackness. And the bug, when the bug talks, why should I stop? Cooperation of lead letters is futile. It will not save the lowly thought. I am a descendant of the house of trees. Breathing stale air depresses me. A bird which died advised me to commit flight to memory. The ultimate extent of powers is union, joining with the bright principle of the sun and pouring into the understanding of light. It is natural for windmills to fall apart. Why should I stop? I clasp to my breast the unripe bunches of wheat and breastfeed them. Now I can't read this. In the land of dwarfs, the criteria of compassion have always traveled in the orbit of zero. Why should I stop? I obey the four elements and the job of drawing up. The constitution of my heart is not the business of the local government of the blind. What is the lengthy whispering wilderness in animals' sexual organs to me? What is the worm's humble movement in its fleshy vacuum? The bleeding ancestry of flowers has committed me to life. Are you familiar with the bleeding ancestry of the flowers?
I have several and wanted to make sure I picked the right one for Asia. Just to have it right side up. This is a poem that I wrote that was inspired by the paintings of Marc Chagall. And the thing that impressed me about his paintings was the combination of violence, which was a reflection of the times he was living in, and coupled with this violence was this very sort of overview of hope, and the juxtaposition kind of surprised me. It's called Enter Dreaming. Enter my dream, dreaming. There is room for everyone here in the air above history, where I am floating. Sidewise, like Chagall's brides, my head severed, birds fledge from my open throat. Bearded shadows whisper secrets, assignations in my trumpet flower ear, my crown of carnations. Chickens roost in my bosom. Below me, men are green. They skate slick on killing grounds among beseeching cows, and bloody matrons past beseeching, clinging to clotheslines in violin winds, feet and aprons flapping over mud, dust, dung. Houses slide from horizons. Nothing stays upright. Above me, music cleaves sunlight, reveals objects, white sheets, red roses, glowing candlesticks. We swim in reflected radiance. My hem brushes the vortex, rim of transubstantiation, self to sun, life to dream. Enter my dream, dreaming. There is room for everyone here in the air above history, where I am floating.
Our house this evening, one of them was Dick here, and he goes up to Mount Desert Island and looks through telescopes there and on dark weeks and observes the stars. So this is Robert Frost. O star, the fairest one in sight, we grant your loftiness the right to some obscurity of cloud. It will not do to say of night, for dark is what brings out your light. Some reserve becomes the proud, but to be wholly taciturn in your reserve is not allowed. Say something to us. We can learn by heart and then alone repeat. Say something and it says, I burn, but say with what degree of heat. Talk Fahrenheit, talk centigrade. Use language we can comprehend. Tell us what elements you blend. It gives us strangely little aid, but steadfast as Keats' eremite, not even stooping from its sphere, it asks of us a certain height. So when at times the mob is swayed to carry praise or blame too far, we may find something like a star to stay our minds on and be stayed. I think that's kind of the sense of the evening.
Do you have the appetite for one more?
Oh yeah. Voracious.
We'll see, somebody might want to quote me, Daniel, if it gets too long. So, well, poetry, I think, for me is on many different levels, but the first one, I love the cover of this book. So that was pretty enticing to me. But the reason I chose this poem by Richard Blanco is that we live in Manchester, New Hampshire, and we have a wonderfully rich refugee and immigrant community. And I spend a little bit of my time working with them to help them learn English. But also Daniel and I help when they are ready to become citizens, to help them practice the citizenship test. So we have a little bit of insight into this wonderful richness of our country, and I was so moved when I heard Richard Blanco deliver this poem called One Today. And I apologize, it's a little bit long, but I won't read it in Spanish too, because it's in Spanish and in English. So one today, one sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth across the Great Plains, then charging across the Rockies. One light waking up rooftops, under each one a story told by our silent gestures moving behind windows. My face, your face, millions of faces in morning's mirrors, each one yawning to life, crescendoing into our day. Pencil yellow school buses, the rhythm of traffic lights, fruit stands, apples, limes, and oranges arrayed like rainbows begging our praise. Silver trucks heavy with oil or paper, bricks or milk, teeming over highways alongside us, on our way to clean tables, read ledgers, or save lives, to teach geometry, or ring up groceries as my mother did for 20 years, so I could write this poem for us today. All of us as vital as the one light we move through, the same light on blackboards with lessons for the day, equations to solve, history to question, or atoms imagined, the I have a dream we keep dreaming, or the impossible vocabulary of sorrow that won't explain the empty desks of 20 children marked absent today and forever. Many prayers, but one light breathing color into stained glass windows, life into the faces of bronze statues, warmth onto the steps of our museums and park benches as mothers watch children slide into the day. One ground, our ground, rooting us to every stalk of corn, every head of wheat sown by sweat and hands, hands gleaning coal or planting windmills in deserts and hilltops that keep us warm, hands digging trenches, rooting pipes and cables, hands as worn as my father's cutting sugar cane so my brother and I could have books and shoes. The dust of our farms and deserts, cities and plains mingled by one wind, our breath. Breathe. Hear it through the day's gorgeous din of honking cabs, buses launching down avenues, the symphony of footsteps, guitars and screeching subways, the unexpected songbird on your clothesline. Here, squeaky playground swings, trains whistling, or whispers across cafe tables. Here, the doors we open for each other all day saying, hello, shalom, buongiorno, howdy, namaste, or buenos dias. In the language my mother taught me, in every language spoken into one wind carrying our lives without prejudice, as these words break from my lips. One sky, since the Appalachians and Sierras claimed their majesty, and the Mississippi and Colorado worked their way to the sea. Thank the work of our hands, weaving steel into bridges, finishing one more report for the boss on time, stitching another wound or uniform, the first brush stroke on a portrait or the last floor on the Freedom Tower, jutting into a sky that yields to our resilience. One sky toward which we sometimes lift our eyes, tired from work, some days guessing at the weather of our lives, some days giving thanks for a love that loves you back, sometimes praising a mother who knew how to give, or forgiving a father who couldn't give what you wanted. We head home through the gloss of rain, or weight of snow, or the plum blush of dust, but always, always home. Always under one sky, our sky, and always one moon like a silent drum, tapping on every rooftop and every window of one country, all of us facing the stars. Hope, a new constellation waiting for us to map it, waiting for us to name it together.